Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this town hall meeting. I'm really pleased you could join us. I think we have a decent number of people on the call now, and I think the experience in the past continues. I think we should have a good, healthy number of people on the call. So welcome, thanks. This is part of the ongoing series of meetings I've been holding to talk about our university's mission and vision and our values, our future strategy, in other words, and building on the conversation conducted last year. I know there are probably a number of people who are on the call now who attended a similar meeting last week. If you were at that one, glad you're back again, and I apologize if I'm repetitive in this meeting. I'm trying through these town halls to reach as many people as possible inside the university. And I think in each case, the conversation will be slightly different, but the goal is the same. In other words, trying to, in the first instance, validate the insights that are laid out there in the report on the conversation, but turn to the more important task, which is working out what our future strategy should be based on that report and the critical issues that were identified there as, from what I could hear in the conversation and infer overall from that year of consultation, might be our direction for the future. So I think what might be a useful thing to do today is, first of all, begin in our normal way with a formal land acknowledgement, and then we can move into the meeting proper. So even though we're meeting virtually, I want to acknowledge that Queen's University is situated on the traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. We're grateful to be able to live, to learn, and to play on these lands. It's my understanding that this territory is included in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. The Kingston Indigenous community continues to reflect the area's Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee roots, but there is also a significant Métis community, as well as First Peoples from other nations across Turtle Island present here today. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted on my website tomorrow. And I do encourage anybody who has a question or a suggestion or some insights to offer who isn't able to offer those today to do so through the website. That's a very good way to have input into the process. I'll be having more of these open sessions. The next two that are scheduled are on January the 27th and on February the 9th. And I hope you can join me for those, and please encourage colleagues to attend. These sessions are open to everybody, to Queen's faculty, staff, students, and alumni. And I think the discussion will be all the more rich for the diversity of people participating. So thanks. Why don't we get going then? And I'll just say a little bit about the report on the conversation and the timeline by which my hope is we will be able to extrapolate from that document and the insights recorded in it a mission and vision framework for the university, and then in time a comprehensive strategic vision for the university. So I wonder, Keith, if you wouldn't mind putting up the process slide. I'd just like participants today to see how I'm anticipating this process progressing over the next little while. Here you'll see some, these are some draft mission and vision statements, which we might get to later on in the meeting. But I'm just trying to get us to this slide here, which is the, here we go, next steps. Yeah, so this is just to give you a sense of where in this current process we are right now. You'll see this month and next devoted to consultations of this sort. Really interested in a wide-ranging discussion of the report on the conversation and the things which bubble up out of that, that in your view should weigh in the way in which we conceptualize our mission and our vision and the values on which we want to operate. So that's what this consultation is about. The goal, because of course the board at Queen's essentially owns the matter of strategy, the goal is to take a framework to the Board of Trustees in March, a strategic framework, not a detailed strategic plan, but a framework which identifies a mission and vision, identifies a number of strategic goals, and also lays out the values which, in our view, should underpin the evolution of our university in the years to come. So that is the target for the delivery of that framework to the board is the March board meeting. Then you'll see also in March a kickoff for a number of implementation working groups. So you'll see later on, I'll put up a slide that'll show the list of strategic goals, and none of these will surprise you since they are drawn very directly from the report on the conversation. So let's say at the end of this process, we have identified those as our strategic priorities. My goal would be from the point of the approval of the framework in March by the board, we would set up a number of implementation working groups around each of those issues. And those groups would do their work over the summer, thinking about initiatives, strategies, goals within their particular field. So let's say community engagement is identified as one of those strategic goals, or internationalization. So my hope will be that by the end of the summer, we will have from those working groups some exciting new initiatives which can be brought together in an overall strategic plan, which would comprise the high-level strategic framework and, in a sense, a pan-university implementation plan. So that's what's going on there. In spring 2021, working groups developed these implementation priorities, and that would involve more consultations of this sort. They're more focused on each of the strategic goals. There will, as there always must be at universities, a steering committee to oversee all of this. And at the end of the summer, I would anticipate a steering committee that finalizes this comprehensive set of documents, the framework, the implementation goals, and so on. And then with that kind of clarity about what we anticipate occurring in the university, we can then launch a communication strategy, because of course, once we know internally what it is we're trying to do, and the whole conversation process has been very focused on ascertaining the will and the hopes of our internal community, we will then want to launch a communication strategy which lets the broader community know what it is we're doing and how we see our goals playing out in the future. So that eventually, that which would involve a communications plan, that would go to the board as part of this whole suite of instruments for approval in September. So there's the timeline, and I can come back to that a little later on. My hope is today, in the last half hour, to talk a bit about those sort of hypothetical mission and vision statements I put up. They are not intended to be our mission and vision. They are drafts that you might come up with drawing on the report on the conversation. So why don't we turn to the report, and I'd be very happy to take questions from everyone on the call about any aspect of the report that you'd like to discuss. And if I could ask, though, in particular, have an eye to what that report should mean in terms of the positive projections for our future. Alex Usher, who's been helping me with thinking about university strategy, made the very good point to me recently that the report on the conversation is in a sense a diagnostic document. And implicit in the diagnosis is what matters when one is looking at the issues that are important to the university. But now we're in the process, as we follow that timeline that I just laid out, of turning from the diagnosis into a positive plan to realize those ambitions that we have for the institution that in the report on the conversation I said were somewhat too cautious and conservative. So let me leave it there. And I know Mary Beth is fielding questions and will pass them to me. And I will do my best to provide some good answers on any of the issues you'd like to raise.
Patrick, we don't have many questions come in so far. We'll just remind everyone on the call that if you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A and we will direct it to Patrick. But Patrick, one of the things you spoke about in the report on the conversation is the need for Queen's to articulate a global purpose. And you talk about the UN's Sustainable Development Goals as a framework that we may be able to build that purpose around. Could you just talk a little bit about how you might see those goals speak to local issues as well as global ones?
Thanks, Mary Beth. Yeah, so I did propose that the SDGs might provide a useful framework as Mary Beth described, and I do believe that strongly. The Sustainable Development Goals, taken in their totality, all 17 of them, do really address almost every critical issue that faces the nations of our planet. And that's why the SDGs make a useful paradigm within which to think of our mission. I mean, obviously, we're not going to say Queen's is going to sort of be the global key player in the realization of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That's not the point. The point is to say which of those goals speak to the areas in which we feel we have the capacity to make a difference, and also where do those goals speak to issues on which we aspire to make a difference? And those are, I mean, that's a real question. Do we play just to our strengths, or do we play to what we think is really important? I think the framework is very effective in that way, and many universities have begun to look at the SDGs from this point of view, partly because they create a kind of a lingua franca for talking to each other. So there are these networks of universities that work, let's say, on SDG 2 or on SDG 13. And it's a way of bringing institutions together around a very clearly identified global issue. And then here's the key point in answering your question, Mary Beth. Always doing so from the point of view of their local conditions. I think what is remarkable about the Sustainable Development Goals is they don't all involve us giving attention to things that happen in remote places. Poverty is close to hand. Gender equity and other forms of equity are critically important in our own community close by, in the same way that they are in other parts of the world. So the beauty of the SDGs is that they are about local issues as much as they are about global issues. And I think sometimes the name of the Sustainable Development Goals makes people think, well, it's only about either international development in the traditional sense, or it's all about green strategies and sustainability. No, taken in total, the 17 goals speak, as I say, to all the big issues that are faced by the global community and by communities in their local arenas. And I mean, I think there is an ethical obligation to look first close to home and to be useful and helpful and have an impact there before immediately assuming that the global stage is the stage on which one would like to act. I think increasingly, and this is the result of, I don't know whether this is one of the more positive or negative aspects of globalization, that distinction between the local and the global is less and less tenable. So I'll leave it there, Mary Beth, and can go to another question if you have one.
Yeah, they're definitely coming in now. So this is great. So one question, can you please speak to the role sustainability and climate action initiatives will have in the strategic plan?
Yeah. This has to be a critically important issue. The university's already declared its commitment on these issues in the decision made by our board last year on sustainable investment. We have incredibly innovative work being done on sustainable finance in the Smith School of Business. We have excellent work elsewhere in the Faculty of Arts and Science on the scientific dimensions of climate change and so on. So we have a great deal of work being done in our institution on sustainability questions very broadly. And obviously, for that reason, this will have to be an important part of how we define ourselves and our ambitions for the institution. I mean, merely saying that we are going to work within the framework of the SDGs, placing emphasis where it is appropriate for us to do so, sends the message, I think, fairly unequivocally, that sustainability broadly is an issue not only on which the university does a great deal of work, but to which the university must be committed. Yeah, in my view, that is, in a sense, not a debatable issue. Sustainability in all its dimensions needs to be our top concern.
Will the strategic plan be aligned with the strategic plans being developed independently by various faculties? Or at least will that help inform the faculties before they finalize their own plans?
Yeah, no, so that is a great question. You know, I think, you know, in the best of all possible worlds, you'd want to stop everything and begin this kind of planning exercise with a clean slate. That's not the way things work. Institutions, the different parts of institutions move at their own rates. And when I arrived, we had strategic plans at an advanced stage of development and others just being considered. I'm perfectly comfortable with, in an institution of this sort, which is a very decentralized one, with there being strategic plans in the different units. And I'm also, I think it's perfectly reasonable to suppose that in those plans there will be somewhat differing emphases, which will be driven by discipline and that sort of consideration. I think what's most important is that we all be talking to each other, so that I can say that every one of the deans working on strategy has involved me in the discussions, and I'm perfectly comfortable with the thought, for example, that the discussions underway in engineering and applied science right now will be not only compatible with, but supportive of and supported by the university strategy. I mean, and the reason I can say that is that I think a strategy that emanates, and the board approves these things, so a strategy that just emanates from the board without being supported in the units is not going to succeed. Similarly, a university that's a proliferation of different strategies on the ground with no kind of central and overarching framework, that is not going to be beneficial either. The best thing is, in fact, to come at this from both directions, for there to be an initiative at the center, which is what I'm embarked on here, which is sensitive to and shaped by the currents that are going on in the Faculty of Arts and Science, in the Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science, Education, wherever, but that tries to bring all those strategic initiatives together in some way under some big overarching goals that all parts of the university are excited to get behind. So it's, I'm actually really pleased with the amount of discussion of strategy going on in the university right now, and I think that will all feed admirably into the overall strategy for the institution as it evolves.
Queen's adopted the Okanagan Charter last year, and the university committed to integrating well-being, which is individual and community well-being, into all decision-making and plans. Will this commitment be reflected in the new strategic plan? And if so, where might a focus on well-being be articulated?
It has to be reflected in the plan. You know, I was going to say, if you read between the lines in the report on the conversation, you don't actually have to read in between the lines, you can read the lines themselves. The report is fairly frank about our community and its health in all dimensions, right? I mean, we're all, I think, particularly in the sway of COVID, feeling our health challenged by the circumstances of work, and in particular by the intersection of work with our home lives. It's not been an easy time, so I think everyone is sensitive to this. I also identify some other dimensions of wellness in the report on the conversation that are more in the nature of workplace climate. So all of this is to say, I mean, I think the undertaking made by any institution in signing the Okanagan Charter is a critically important one. I also think it's the minimum that should be asked. Of course, these institutions, which are about the cultivation of human potential and helping young people realize their ambitions and helping gifted scholars discover and publish the results of those discoveries as widely as possible. These are, or ought to be, optimistic places which are focused above all else on individual and societal health, most broadly construed. So it'll be reflected for sure, must be reflected for sure in our strategic planning, in all those dimensions, not just in the things we teach and the things we do research on, but the way in which we do our work, our conditions of operation. All of that needs to be responsive to the commitments made in the Okanagan Charter. And I mean, more than that too, the Charter obliges us to be a health promoting institution. So for that reason, wellness is going to have to be a priority in the strategy. Exactly where we put it is a debatable thing. It could be included under the issue of values. You know, in a sense, the things that underpin us, one of them would be a commitment to wellness. And it's on things like that that I'd be grateful for people's advice, because eventually the strategic plan for the institution is going to be actually a couple of things. It'll be the framework, the high-level mission vision framework. It'll be an implementation plan that addresses these goals. The commitment to wellness has to be there in the high-level framework, because that's where the greatest priorities of the institution need to be signaled. But then I would expect to see it in the more operational plan reflected in a number of the initiatives that come forward and so on. So it's probably true to say, you know, it should suffuse the plan if we're to do this right.
Okay, just leading off of that question, Kathy Lemon has asked, that given the findings in the report regarding the staff experience at Queen's, can you tell us how those concerns might be addressed? And will you be including the various staff unions in this process?
Yeah, hi, Kathy. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a process that is already underway. I mean, I found even halfway through the conversation, some of what was emerging of the nature of people's experience working at Queen's was concerning. And so I think here again, as with so many of these things, one has to come at it from the point of view of the kind of high level commitment, which is, it has to be there in the strategic framework. I mean, we have to say what kind of a place we want this to be and how we want to interact with each other. So it will be there. You'll see when I put up my my sort of straw man set of mission, vision and values, you'll see that there is something in there that speaks to this. But at the same time, at the operational level, and here we don't need to wait for an operational plan. We must already do it. And that is, there needs to be a discussion in this place that involves human resources, that involves anyone with responsibilities for managing a unit, about how we're going to treat people and what is expected and what will not be accepted. So that, you know, what am I saying? I think it's already receiving attention, that issue, but also it needs to be declared very forthrightly in our values as sort of a precondition for our university to be successful. We have to treat each other properly. And if I could say also, Kathy, another thing, I mean, I know the question is largely about people's employment experiences. And I would say to you, of course, the insights of the unions are always important in an issue like this. We're all partners in making this a good place for people to work. And so I would say unequivocally, of course, interested in talking to the unions about what improvements can be made. But where was I going with that? Oh, I've lost my thread. You'll have to forgive me, but if I pick up the thread again, I will jump back to this question. But I hope that answers the question, Kathy.
We have a question from Alan McAvoy. How will the university's budget situation impact the magnitude and timing of this strategic framework and the goals that will be contained within it?
Yeah, Alan, a great question. Well, I think it's important to be realistic, not about our aspirations and ambitions. I think we need to be aspirational, we need to be ambitious. We have to think big, but we also cannot be naive. So I think, you know, a pragmatic account of our financial prospects would sound something like this. I think Queen's is in I think a very strong position comparatively in the university sector. This is the result of some very difficult sacrifices made over the last 10 years. We've begun to emerge from those difficult times, and some remarkable things have been done to put us on a good financial footing. And one of them would be the new pension plan jointly with the University of Toronto and with Guelph. And that is going to make a big difference. So during Daniel Wolf's time, a great deal was done to set the place on as good a financial footing as possible. And I will say the board is very seized of this issue still, maintaining the financial health of the institution, which is after all what we all want for the university, so we can do our work. So we're in a good place. And I would say even the challenges of COVID, which everyone knows, the financial challenges have been enormous in an institution like this, the foregone revenues from residents and other ancillaries and so on. These are very real hits to the university, and like the province and like the federal government, the university's finances will take a little while to recover from COVID. At the same time, we can look at our prospects in terms of funding. Government controls the grant, which is of course not indexed, never has been. So on a per student basis, funding is, as everybody knows, amongst the lowest in North America, and certainly the lowest in the country. And what's the likelihood of the grant on a per student basis increasing? I would think not great, to be honest, especially given the challenges that government faces now in the health crisis. Then you might look at student tuition. I think students are paying enough tuition, and every right-thinking person is recognizing that tuition in our province has escalated. It doesn't mean it's impossible to imagine further increases, but it is difficult to imagine asking students to pay more, first of all, in the present circumstances, and then secondly, without increasing the financial support to them, which in turn costs money. So, and then let's add to that government actually controls the possibility of tuition increases, and we are currently frozen. So all of which is to say, we can't be naive about our strategy for the future, or at least naive about the financial context in which it will have to be mapped out and played out. At the same time, that's as it ever was. And I would think the university that waits for its financial ship to come in before it plans an ambitious strategy will never achieve its ambitions. So what we have to do is we have to think aggressively and boldly. We have to make use of every asset we have to do the best job we can. And we have to be innovative and creative about how we do that. I mean, the task of our planning is really how to maximize our material circumstances. And there are things we can do. There have been some interesting discussions recently about whether there are ways in which the budget model can be altered to support the academic ambitions of the institution so it serves them better. So I'm pleased to say there is a great deal of positive discussion at the Provost Advisory Committee on Budget about attending to that. There are other ways in which we can look at maximizing the resources that we do have by more effective use of them. So what I'm after here is a strategy that simultaneously does two things: helps us reach high as an academic institution. I mean, Queen's has a remarkable history and reputation, and it has amazing assets. So it's not ludicrous to think of us setting some very bold goals for ourselves. And if we manage our resources well, we can do that. And if we leverage those resources well, through things like partnerships and so on, then I think that is the way to being successful. I think, Alan, I mean, the key point I would make is that the budget is something we have that has to work for us and for our ambitions. We don't work for it. So that if we want to be ambitious, we have the tool and we can work on it and reimagine it so that it is more supportive of those goals.
Alison Yoakum has asked, with respect to the SDGs, do you have any preliminary thoughts on how some of these can be operationalized?
Oh, Alison, great question. Sandra Donato has been working with me on the SDGs and ways in which we can begin to think about operationalizing our work in support of them. It's a bit too early for me to say exactly how. What I can say is that through the process of making our submission to the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, we did what I think has to be done before you can do anything in this regard, and that's we did a sort of stock taking. So we know how much work is already going on, in what parts of the university there is an engagement with the SDGs already. And so I think through the process that we're just getting underway, we're going to be able to identify with increasing particularity some areas in which particular initiatives to support the SDGs might be fruitful. I wish I could be more specific than that, but I think that is the work of the next several months, to actually put people together who have an interest in the SDGs and to think about what a series of kind of integrated initiatives might look like that we could embed into our planning for the future. I'm going to publish an op-ed in the next little while in the Gazette, I hope, about the SDGs. And I will there make an appeal to everyone in the university community who has a particular interest in the SDGs to come forward and be part of a group that can think about the most effective way to take action in support of them. So that will be forthcoming fairly soon. And my hope is that once I can identify people who want to be leaders on these issues, we can begin to narrow down some initiatives that would be most promising in that regard. So if you could keep an eye out for that, and I will remember to come to you, Alison, when we start that process.
Great. Patrick, I'm just wondering if maybe looking at the time, if we should perhaps move into the draft mission and vision value statements that you've prepared, so that if anyone has any questions or discussion on that, we can go there.
Yeah, sure. I think what we're aiming for, our meeting goes an hour and a half, I believe. So
yes.
Good. Okay, I think that's a good idea, Mary Beth. Let's, if Keith, you wouldn't mind putting up the draft mission statement. Now, I hope everybody will understand. These are straw men. So what I did with these is I looked at the issues that had emerged in the conversation, and I simply asked the question: well, if I were to write an account of our mission based on these key issues, what might it look like? And here's a draft text for a mission statement. A number of people have said to me, well, it's not ambitious enough. It doesn't get me excited. And that's fine. It's important to know maybe I have a very low pulse rate, but it doesn't take a whole lot to get me excited. And I do find some of the goals laid out here are very significant and ambitious, but perhaps in their articulation, they seem somewhat conservative. But what I'm trying to get in this is to register the key components of our identity. First of all, that we're a scholarly community. I don't know how else to describe what a university is other than that, but there are probably snappier ways of putting it, that aspires to elevate the prospects of all people and the planet by the pursuit and dissemination of knowledge. Some people reading the report on the conversation, by the way, were sort of irritated. These are sort of more on the outside of the university than on the inside. Irritated by the sort of preoccupation with global purpose. People said to me, no, the point of a university is to teach students. And well, yes, it is, but we do that for a greater purpose. And that's what I'm trying to capture here. So the pursuit of knowledge captures research, and dissemination, of course, captures our teaching mission. And those two things are to serve the greater good of humanity and the planet. So that's what I was trying to capture in the first sentence. And then through research and teaching, and also directly in its operations as a leading and influential Canadian institution, the university seeks to realize the goal of an informed, wise, creative, healthy, and equitable society, responsive to and responsible for the environment which sustains it. All right, it's a typical sentence written by an English prof with maybe too many subclauses, but there are a couple of things in this part of the mission statement, and that is this reference to seeking to realize this particular kind of community through its operations. And this partly gets to Kathy Lemon's question, which is that, yes, by teaching everything we teach, by teaching chemistry, by teaching sociology or law or whatever, we are seeking to contribute, or doing research in those areas, we're seeking to contribute to this goal of an informed, wise, creative, healthy, and equitable society. But it's hypocritical to seek that through the research and teaching we do if we don't live it. And that's what this rather odd sentence in the middle is about, also directly in its operations. We need, if we are about a certain kind of vision for society, the first place to attend to it is here. So that's what that sentence is intended to do. And then the other point, which I think was Alan's question about sustainability, that last clause, they're responsive to and responsible for the environment which sustains it, is a way of registering in the mission statement our commitment to sustainability. Now, you might say, just say it more forthrightly, and that probably is what has to happen in our mission statement. This is language that is perhaps too convoluted and trying to capture too many nuances, but I was just trying to make sure that some of those key themes were all captured in that. So Keith, if you move on to the vision one, I'm just going to walk you through these things, and then I'm interested in, you know, you can take them apart and make whatever suggestions you like. So, you know, the mission is sort of what you understand your job to be. The vision is how you'd like to be regarded, you know, at the height of your achievement. And you might say this is not ambitious enough. Building on its history as a major contributor to human attainment, good government, and prosperity in Canada, Queen's will be recognized as an influential, active, and engaged global partner in education and research for sustainable societal impact. What I was trying to do here was signal what I think we have to signal, and that is that our reputation has hitherto largely been a national reputation, an enviable one, and a fine national reputation. But for many reasons, that should not be sufficient for us. And so that's why I'm suggesting, you know, so that we've worked towards these things very fallibly, I would say, human attainment, good government, and prosperity in Canada. So there is, you know, there's lots about our history that is problematic, and I register that in the report on the conversation. But on the other hand, that is what the institution has sought to do nationally. And I think what's implicit here is that on the basis of a different set of values, we wish to play that role globally. And the last thing I'll say about this is that that phrase sustainable societal impact is a way of talking about the SDGs and all the dimensions from equity and availability of food and water health, and you name it, all of those things included in the ambit of the 17 SDGs are captured under that phrase, sustainable societal impact. That's the vision as I thought one might articulate it. Keith, could you move on to the next one, which I think is the values. So if you think of a sort of framing document, this is our opportunity to say on what we're going to found the work we do. We live our vision daily. That is, again, that the point that Kathy Lemon's question raised. But there it says, that is a commitment to us. We're not going to talk a good line about what an asset we are to the globe. We're actually going to be the kind of place we'd like to see at a macro level, the globe be. And then here again, this is a response to those remarks in the report on the conversation about how we treat each other. Collegiality, generosity, trust, and respect animate our interactions. If they don't, they should. And that is one of the reasons for setting lofty goals and ambitions for the institution. Equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization, as well as a sense of responsibility for the planet and all the life it sustains. These imperatives frame the mission and vision of Queen's University. I'm sure everyone on the call could write a different version of this value statement, but this is the one that in which I tried to catch up the areas of our life as a university, areas of value in our life as a university that, if not in crisis, nevertheless are needing attention. Keith, is the next slide strategies or strategic goals? Yes, I thought so. So here I try to catch up the goals that sort of emerge from the report on the conversation, things that have to matter to us and that will need very focused attention. And these are the goals, in other words, that those working groups I was talking about will address. So exemplary groundbreaking research, whether curiosity-driven, applied, or community-based, obviously. Outstanding quality and innovation in its educational programs at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. Maybe you can move on to the next slide. And you'll remember these things are signaled in the report on the conversation as critically important. In the context of an overall alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals, interdependence of the research and teaching missions, especially through the greater integration of research in the undergraduate experience. You'll remember in the report, I advanced the suggestion made to me several times that one way of building our research culture is to drive it more deeply into the undergrad experience. See, Alan is saying, isn't all research curiosity driven? Of course, you're right. I can come back to that question, Alan. All right, and let's go on to the next slide. And here, yeah, to strengthen Queen's position globally, a comprehensive integrated program of internationalization that includes not only student and faculty mobility, but also curriculum reform. And what hitherto one is referred to as internationalization at home, but in conversation just yesterday with Sandra Donata, I began to think of would be best spoken about as how to, in our setting, capture a global pluralistic environment in our teaching and learning. Internationalization at home is an odd phrase because it presupposes a settled notion of home, which in our current transitional phase as an institution, I think is a slightly problematic one. And then I point there to enhance global partnerships in research and education. Obviously, this is that part of the report that really sees looking beyond ourselves to partners in order to lift our game. And that, as you'll recall from the report on the conversation, is a recurring theme. I think we as an institution have suffered historically from our own self-sufficiency, as it were, our sense that others can learn from us, but us not from others. So let's, is there one more, I think? Yes, here we go. And this picks up the question Mary Beth put right at the start of the session. And here we have a goal to strengthen Queen's position locally, deliberate, strategic, respectful, and mutually beneficial engagement with communities outside the university, including the city and region, other organizations and institutions, as well as the national and global networks which share our goals. So forgive the weird grammar of these goals. They typically come after rubrics, so they do make grammatical sense, but I hope you get the drift. So there is my straw man. So it's a draft mission, a draft vision, an articulation of the values that would underpin our work, and then these 5 strategic goals which speak to the areas that emerged in the conversation as requiring attention. And under each of those, we'd have now, beginning in a month or two, we'd begin to have working groups identifying which would be the most effective kinds of initiatives to undertake to advance the overall mission. So can I leave it there and have a sip of water? And then, Mary Beth, I'm happy to hear anybody's questions. And please do understand that none of the stuff is written in stone. This is written so that we can talk about it as a possible way of characterizing our work.
Definitely have a drink of water, Patrick. I don't envy you just talking into your screen for that long. Of course, this would be much different than if we were on campus holding the conversation where you would have people in front of you. But we have spurred some more questions here about what you just presented. So how do the vision and mission differentiate Queen's from other Canadian universities?
Well, that is the critical question. What I think about that as an issue, well, universities, although yes, it seems that for the most part, when they put out strategic plans, they all look the same. That's not at all surprising, since they're typically trying to do the same thing. I mean, so there is always going to be a family resemblance between universities. And while I do take the point that we have to be differentiated, and I'm absolutely committed to us finding a kind of an axis on which we can differentiate ourselves. And I think we're there, frankly, because of what I heard in the conversation, if it's not reflected in this document. I also don't think a valuable strategy for a university is a strategy that helps us achieve what we want to do. Uniqueness is not necessarily desirable, and a unique strategy will not necessarily translate into a greater degree of success for the university that propounds it. So when I had a discussion with some members of our board about this, the same question was put to me, how should we differentiate ourselves, and do these statements do it? Well, they probably don't, to be honest. Then one can think about, the grounds on which we do conceive of our uniqueness as an institution. But we need to step cautiously there, because much of what gives us our unique identity is cultural, and much of the fluidity in our institution at the moment around issues of EDII has to do with that cultural conception of what we are. So we need to be careful about that. At the same time, I think someone has pointed out to me that one of the things we've done here historically is produce leaders through the excellent students we bring in and attract, and maybe that is the thing we concentrate on. In other words, pick up that thing which is a distinguishing feature of the Queen's education. It's the broader learning environment, all that kind of thing, and hang on to the notion, but allow for its reconceptualization in this way of EDII and other considerations of that sort. Places can differentiate themselves incredibly using the SDGs. Some institutions have committed themselves to a very limited number. Gothenburg University in Sweden has almost entirely organized itself around the SDGs, and it does make it a fairly unique operation. But let's remember the context in which we exist. The Canadian research intensives are actually a family in which there's a strong resemblance from one institution to the next. And we want to indicate what is special about us. But we shouldn't do so on a kind of a factitious superficial basis. I don't know. I'm sure it didn't sound very good that as a response, but I think we have to differentiate ourselves. But let's not fetishize the notion of differentiation.
Okay. Our rector, Sam Hinstra, has asked a question. Students have fervently spoken for decolonization of the institution and greater supports for QT BIPOC folks in our community. How will this strategy foster these goals? And how can we ensure that we are at the forefront in our sector for this work?
Thanks, Sam. Great question. I'd point right to the values section, where that vision of society, a fully inclusive, supportive community is articulated. I think the place at which the likelihood of our success in addressing LGBTQ, BIPOC, and Indigenous issues is where that will be addressed is in the operational plan. I think the strategy has to signal the importance, the critical importance. I mean, what I said in the conversation is we will get nowhere unless we properly address those issues. So I think they need to be signaled in the strategic framework. And then the initiatives that will help us succeed or achieve more success with those communities and in providing support to those communities and helping them succeed, that will have to be in the implementation plan. But it is critically important. And on this, as on a number of other areas, we're all already making progress and work is being done. But I take your question as a way of underlining the centrality of this question, and I totally accept it, and it has to be reflected there. The how comes through implementation.
So just related to this, someone has said that it's great to see EDII included in the values, but I would like to see something in the vision around decolonization. Considering the conversations going on around campus and being quite a notable colonial institution, I feel like this would not just hold the institution accountable for true change, but also be a very aspirational goal given our history.
Yeah.
It's more of a comment than a question, but
that's a very valuable comment, actually, and well worth thinking about in this context. You know, as the person making the comment suggests, you know, it has the double benefit of sending a message, but also holding us accountable for achieving it. Yeah, and I think there is force to that argument precisely for the reason given, which is our colonial history. Like all institutions of our age in this country, we are complicit with a certain dark part of our history, and to signal in this bolder way that we're actually setting off in a different direction has a lot of force to it. So it's something I will keep at the top of mind in thinking about the way in which to revise these two statements.
And then continuing on the theme, Petra Fackinger has asked, or has provided another comment. I wonder if the mission statement should include a commitment to anti-racism at Queen's, as mission statements are meant to guide the governance of the institution. EDII has such a prominent place in the report.
Yeah, I think, Petra, it's a good point. I like the last point, in fact. I think, you know, if one imagined moving beyond these sort of draft, rather conservative statements I put in front of you to something bold, it would have to be, you know, either, you know, or both the explicit mention of decolonization or anti-racism. Yeah, you know, this goes back to the question of differentiation. A mission and vision statement could say, we're setting off in a new direction, and here's how, and name those issues. So thanks, Petra, a really useful thought.
Laura Murray has also provided another comment, and she says, from one English prof to another, I like the nuances of the vision statement. For example, responsive to and responsible for, neither is enough on its own.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate what you say. I mean, one thing that emerged from the conversation was, how complex all of these issues are in the university, and how at any given moment, we can be possessed by one particular issue. And that's sort of the way it works. We have 6 months where we seem to be talking about nothing but one thing, and then suddenly that disappears into the background. We're talking about another thing. But the truth is, the strength, the viability, and the future of the institution resides in those complexities. And the easy way to differentiate an institution is not to acknowledge the complexities, but to go for the big tickets inside. Whereas my view is that an institution like ours of substance should express itself in ways that are properly nuanced and thoughtful. So thanks, Laura.
We have another question/comment from Yolande Chan. Thanks for these inspiring statements. The vision statement may be narrow, though. I agree with the EDII comments that have been made. Also, the current statement recognizes limited excellence in government and two vaguely defined areas, human attainment and prosperity. Sustainable societal impact is the goal. Are there other important goals, health, business, science, etc.? And does the vision statement demonstrate this?
Yeah. Great point, Yolande. Well, I'll be tapping you on the shoulder to refine these statements, because I think those are very good points. Perhaps the goal does need to be more explicit. Naming health. I tried there again. This is. Here I'm appealing to Laura's sympathetic ear. I tried to capture that in that phrase. Let me see if I can remind myself of its sustainable societal impact. I told myself as I wrote it that wellness, prosperity, all of those things are captured there. But on the other hand, if the phrase is obscure, that's not going to inspire anybody. So maybe being more explicit, as in the present statement, is a good thing. I do think, this takes us back to our discussion of the issue of wellness. I think being really specific on that question and what we mean by it, in both the narrow and the broader sense, might be an important addition to the way in which this is phrased. So thanks, Yolande. I'm very sympathetic to your suggestions there. So perhaps we can talk offline about refinements that could be made along those lines.
Okay. Terry Lynn Brennan has a question. What do you see currently and or in the future as the benefits either local or international partners gain from aligning themselves with Queen's, especially local partners? What would they gain out of a closer relationship?
It's a really, really good question, Terry Lynn. Well, I suppose the answer depends on what those partners do. So just yesterday, I was at an announcement in which the Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, FedDev, the federal agency, announced its non-repayable loan to Kingston of, I think it's just under 4 million. And that is money intended to facilitate partnerships between the parts of the university and other agencies, businesses, and so on, in order to help those businesses get on their feet or achieve things or scale up their operations. So, you can see, if you look at innovation, right, you can see that businesses obviously have a lot of potential benefit from partnering with universities, and university researchers do derive benefit from those partnerships. And we are very strong in corporate partnerships in research. In fact, I think in Research InfoSource, we just showed ourselves as being close to the top, if not the top in the country, in terms of the proportion of our research activities that arise out of those kinds of partnerships. An area in which there are clear benefits to be had, but I think they're sort of at the moment inchoate, really, has to do with social agencies in the city of Kingston. And you can see I talk about it in the report on the conversation. I actually think, quite apart from the normal economic benefits we can point to that the city enjoys by virtue of having a large university in it, there is a whole lot else that we can and should do to be an asset in our community, and to do it on a formal basis, to name it as something we're committed to, to be like, I'm thinking of universities like Carnegie Mellon in the States, who at different times have been a massive resource to their community in improving the quality of life, prosperity, and wellness in their communities. And we have that potential in Kingston. It's not that we've never exercised it, but I think we should raise it to the up the flagpole as one of our priorities, and become not just a coincidental partner by virtue of being in the city, but an intentional partner by virtue of our wish to make a positive impact in the city of Kingston. And similarly, I would say I value enormously our partnership with the other post-secondary institutions in the city, with the Royal Military College and the St. Lawrence College. I think we can be a much better partner to those institutions, and we can build something really, really positive with those institutions that will be for the benefit of our students, our researchers, every employee in the university, and hugely beneficial for our community. So I think, here's what I'd say. We have a lot to offer, but if I might say so, we haven't always been quick to give it in partnerships. We don't have a great record in partnering with our local college, although that is much better now. And there is a lot we can do there. So if our mood and our orientation is right, and if we actually believe we can learn from and benefit from a kind of contributing partnership with other organizations, we should do it. As I said earlier on, what I'll euphemistically call our self-sufficiency has hurt us in the past. So maybe I'll leave that question there.
Have students been involved in the drafting of the vision, mission, values, and strategic goals?
Well, sadly, this document up in front of you is one man's work, and it's mine, based on the conversation, but it's intended to be the focus for conversations with all kinds of constituencies in the university. And I am meeting with AMS Assembly, and I have had numerous meetings with students and student groups throughout the process of the conversation. So to the extent that students have been part of that discussion and will be part of this discussion we're having, students have been very involved, and I hope will be even more involved. I've had, as I say, meetings with groups of students, but most strikingly, numerous one-on-one meetings with students who got in touch to say they wanted to talk about these issues. So my hope is that these statements, or whatever they lead to, I reiterate, these are not necessarily the things we're going to be stuck with. These are a talking talking point at the moment. And I hope I'll hear from students about what they think would be important to see in these statements.
Does an aspect of the vision and values include some form of nation-to-nation relationships with regional Indigenous communities? And this is just another follow-up question from Terry Lynn Brennan.
I think it does and must, Terry Lynn. I haven't thought it through in those terms. Obviously our role in relation to the Indigenous community is, of course, one that's very much in my mind after the polishing the chain ceremony yesterday. It is critically important. It's like all of those dimensions of EDII and decolonizing that are essential if we're to make progress. But what it means at the level of nation-to-nation dialogue, I need to think through, because I mean, to the extent that our institution is a product of a colonial exercise, and to the extent that we have been a contributor to the prosecution of a colonial mandate, we do, in some sort of abstract sense, represent the history of the nation. We don't, in any technical legal sense, represent the nation of Canada as it's understood historically. But Terry Lynn, it's a complex question, and I don't want to just burble. I'd rather think more carefully about that. And if you were willing, I'd be very happy to have a further conversation with you about it. And I would actually, on this issue, I would want to confer with Aboriginal Council, take advice from Mark Green and other members of our Indigenous community.
Okay. And she just piped back in to say thank you, Patrick, of course. So we have a few more minutes before we wrap up. Patrick, there's not any other questions that have come in through the chat. We're going to experiment with something now. While we can try to make we have about 60 attendees still on the call. We have a few dropped off after 3 o'clock. We're going to try to make everyone live. So you can actually see some of the people. If you care to turn on your camera, if you don't, that's fine. You don't have to turn on your camera. And then if anyone did want to ask a question live, we'll have a few questions left to do that. Does that sound okay? Let's try it.
That sounds good to me. I hope people are comfortable with this.
Okay. So.
Yes.
Very good. Good to see you all uncloaking like a Klingon ship.
Again, you certainly don't have to turn on your camera or anything, but it is very nice to see faces. And if anyone did want to speak up and say hello, we'll just ask you to do that. Not all at once, of course, but just give us a moment while we work through the list to turn everybody on.
Good. Yeah, so this could sort of be an open season moment.
It could.
16 minutes in which you can all have at me. So please don't hesitate.
Well, I've wanted to do this for other town halls, but frankly, the group's been just a little bit too large. So I think with a group this size, we could make this work. So
Can I say, everybody, thank you for your questions and comments. Really stimulating and helpful. And, I mean, as I've been at pains to say, no part of this is settled or decided. So these discussions are really, really important. Do you want to tell me what you think about how ambitious we should be in this? I mean, nobody wants to be laughable, right? I mean, a few people have pointed me to the mission and vision of Cambridge University and said, well, there's a model. Well, really, I do admire our institution, but let's be sensible. But how ambitious do you think we should be? Yolande.
Patrick, or Principal Deane, I find ambition motivating. I find that having something that is visionary, that pulls me beyond where I am, is very positive. So I welcome ambition. In fact, that was my concern with the vision statement. I didn't find that it was sufficiently ambitious. So I welcome ambition and applaud the direction in which you are headed.
Thanks, Yolande. That's great. I see two Jennifers agreeing, so that's very good. I'm convinced of that too. And I think there's a way of articulating a high level of ambition that inspires us all inside, but doesn't make people outside think, what on earth are they thinking of? You know, I know there's a way to do that. So thanks, Yolande. I appreciate that. See, Mona has a comment for us here.
It's faster to type than it is to speak.
Yeah, hi, Mona, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I'm, just speaking from various experiences of people, I just find that sometimes we limit our own potential by listening to others and their expectations of what should be the case. And often it's that people's perspectives can be so narrow. Quick story, somebody just passed away who graduated in my father's engineering class. So they're the class of 1968. Well, it should have been 66, but because of political whatever, it was 1968. And there were 3 women in their engineering class. And he came here in 1968 for graduate school, and it was unheard of in Canada. Whereas, women were there in Bangladesh, but it was the attitudes that he saw here that caused women who were in engineering or in medicine at that time, when he thought, why is it such a big deal? But it was causing the women to drop out of school. So it's really like these attitudes that are limiting potential for people. So I don't tend to listen to what people say, honestly. That's just me.
Good. Thanks, Mona. Anyone else?
I have to leave.
Yeah, Yolande, go ahead again.
Thank you again. One hard question that you may face at some point is, how do you actually measure progress? So after setting such a lovely vision and reiterating these values to ensure that this is concrete and real, at some point you will be asked to talk about measures in terms of attainment of these goals and accomplishment of the vision, etc. So that's the next step. But I think that that shouldn't in any way deter us from setting a high bar and then multiple strategies to deliver on the goals.
Yeah. Thanks, Yolande. I have a typical humanist's problem with metrics and things of that sort, and one's always pushed to think about metrics. And I know we have to. I mean, we have to have a way, we have to have a mechanism for assessing whether we're making any progress on this stuff. And I think there are ways, there are proxy measures that can be useful for some of these issues. And then there are other areas where some kind of quantifiable data is possible. But yeah, I know I will be pushed there, and probably sooner than I'm comfortable with. But I've never believed, I can't remember what that thing is that people parrot out, that, what gets measured gets done, or, what gets measured matters. Everybody's got their own version of that. And I don't believe it. And B, it's potentially so killing to a kind of an ambitious human mission and undertaking to worry prematurely about measurements. So I'll get there, and I'll appeal to colleagues to help me work out the metrics thing. Jenny, go ahead.
I was, rather than thinking of, I mean, I'm coming from a discipline that's very metric driven, but maybe it's, can we describe, you know, can we, so that it does include measurement, but it also, what stories can we tell that illustrate what we've been able to achieve? And I think that those are really important. Yeah,
I think that is the way to go. Particularly with things like the SDGs. I mean, we could quantify, for example, how much work we're doing. Can we quantify what the impact of that is? Hard to tell, but there would be stories that one could tell about that work and the way it is bringing benefit. That would be confirmation, I think. I suppose it's all, you know, to get back to that issue of nuance. We need declarations of our mission, vision, and values that are appropriately nuanced for the complexity of the institution. And then we've got to be ready to come up with metrics that are sufficiently nuanced to do justice to those things. And I think that is the challenge.
Patrick, in the chat, Terry Lynn just added that I think your statement in the report about some of the Queen's community being risk adverse may be better thought of as change adverse, with the caveat that risk can equal innovative.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, that whole dimension of the conversation was very, very revealing to me. Because there's one way of looking at our risk aversion, which I think few people would deny is a defining characteristic at the moment. So, I mean, one way of looking at it would be to say, you know, this goes back to the very challenging period we've been through. You know, institutions go through hard times, and we did go through hard times. I was at the other place at the time, but we did go through hard times here. And a lot of people found the work that had to be done difficult. There were hard decisions that were made. There were jobs lost. There was all kinds of stuff. And so now we're coming out of that phase. So that's one dimension of, or one cause of risk aversion. There's another thing that's related to it, but I think a probably secondary knock-on thing, and this gets to the issue that I think Kathy Lemon raised, which is whether people have the courage to do things for fear of being gotten rid of for taking a chance. And that gets to the issue of, you know, whether we can fail. During really hard times, it's perilous to fail. I mean, it shouldn't be. In a humane institution, it should not be. But in practice, it often is. So the risk aversion has all those dimensions for me. It's a rational, well, no, our habit's rational. It's a habit reasonably derived from a recent history. Then there are other forms of risk aversion that are the result of undesirable social currents and change within our community, perhaps driven by the financial situation, perhaps not, perhaps driven by leadership, who knows, whether local or large in scale. So I actually do think, Terry Lynn, that risk aversion thing is oddly enough the nub of the problem of finding our future as an institution, because it opens on the quality of our university family, the quality of our workplace, our capacity to think big and to have aspirations. It bears on, I mean, even things like that stuff I mentioned in the report about, you know, the hoarding of information. These things all arise from, I think, the same complex network of kind of human motivations, which are, you know, understandable in a particular set of circumstances. But I would say it's not only the nub of whatever problems we have, it's one of the hardest things we're going to have to rid ourselves of. Because it does require, you know, we have to take chances. I might tell you, writing what I did about the university was taking a chance in some circles. But I think, you know, our way forward is through confronting these things and taking the risks that are necessary.
Jenny has her hand up.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi, thank you so much. So I attended a session early this morning, about the social impact that universities can have. It was really interesting, and something that what I really took away from it, there was one person talking about, you know, we want to look at having social impact. We want to be more connected to our community locally and globally. And so I'm thinking about some of what's been said and what you've written, and wondering about some language about reciprocity. So for example, let's say, you know, our researchers, our students, they're out in the local community. We're encouraging more of that. You know, maybe they're gathering information for their research. Maybe they're engaging in experiential learning or service learning, you know, doing things to improve the lives of our local community, and all good intentions. But then what? So how do we invite the community into Queen's? So how do we make sure that they can participate, that they're not sort of, you know, that it's not feeling like a one-way situation where maybe they've been used for research, for service learning, for what have you, but how do they become a part of the institution? And you know, how do we break down this town gown thing that we still kind of struggle with, I think. I mean, I've been here a long time. I've been a student, I've been a staff member, and it's still kind of there.
Yeah. Thanks for raising that, Jenny. A couple of thoughts about it. One, I think you're exactly right. I've been actually interested to find that the phrase community engagement is peculiarly misunderstood here. So when I mention it, I've had people think it refers to, let's say, that kind of partnership on innovation with business. Other people think, oh, well, it's just municipal relations, right? It's just a fancy name for that part of GR that's local. But you know, what's bizarre is that across the country, there is there's a movement focused on community engaged teaching and research, been heavily funded and supported by the McConnell Foundation, who I mentioned in the report, led astonishingly by Simon Fraser University, who've done amazing work. And a key part of all these discussions is the ethics of community engaged work in the academy. You can't just unleash the students on a city like a laboratory, even if they're really well intentioned. They have to know that there are parameters to that engagement. And part of it is actually listening to what the community member says to you. So we have actually, I was at an absolutely wonderful meeting with some of our colleagues in Faculty of Health Sciences just before the holidays. And this is a community engaged research project in medicine, which is absolutely wonderful. They are following what I understand to be the proper ethical parameters for this. So the issue being investigated emerges, in a sense, at the request of the community. The work being done feeds back to the benefit of the community and is constrained by the community. So I think a serious mistake would be to think that this is just about telling people, get out and get active in the community. It's not actually. There's a discipline to it, and there is an ethics to it that we absolutely have to have in place before we engage in things that are not going to be beneficial. At my former institution, we actually ran a course for students on community engagement, how to do it, and we had a unit that actually had a similar course for faculty members who wanted to engage in research projects, so that they would know. We developed a guide for interacting with the university that we gave to members of the community so that they would know the resources they could call on. I mean, there is a whole, I'll call it an infrastructure here. There's an infrastructure that we have to put in place in order to be successful in community engagement. And a huge component of that is that kind of ethical framework and training. Get that in place, it's fabulous. The other thing that I find exciting about community engaged work is that, you know, when it becomes important at universities, someone always resorts to the inevitable suggestion, well, you need an AVP community engagement. You don't actually. You need a different kind of administrative structure that facilitates this kind of thing. The model I've seen work best is a network of community campus partnerships, in which people who work in the community and are part of the university and have a stake in both, in a sense, facilitate those interactions through the network. So I mean, I find it wonderfully subversive of the normal way universities do their work, because it yields different results. It's challenging to the normal administrative structures. And yet it also has the benefit of being hugely beneficial for everyone involved. So Jenny, thank you for the observation. Gave me an opportunity to stand on my soapbox on this, because it's critically important. Fortunately, McConnell Foundation are looking for partners, and I'm interested in our doing something with them. Oh, Mary Beth, you're muted, I'm afraid.
Just to say, this part of the meeting has been quite successful. It's been nice to get this interaction, but I'm afraid we're out of time.
Great
so
to see everybody.
You just want to wrap up quickly, Patrick?
Yeah, well, all I'll say, everyone, is thanks very much. If you were at the earlier meeting, I hope it wasn't too repetitive this time. And if you found the conversation helpful, you know, come along to the others. And always keen to hear from any of you individually if you'd like to get in touch. So thanks very much. Thanks, Mary Beth and Keith and Heather for managing the operations of the meeting. So great to see you all. Great to see Mary Beth's dog too, I might say. Made a cameo appearance. Thanks, everybody.